Hi, my media literacy project was designed with the focus of helping students become more critical about the media that they take in, both in advertising and also in news. During the initial stages of the pandemic, I noticed that headlines were sometimes misleading. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people tend to only look at headlines instead of going more deeply into articles. But it's not just about opening the articles, it's about understanding the sources as well. And I really wanted my students to feel more agency in their information. And I thought that this might be a way to accomplish that. So to begin, I have my objectives. Mostly it's just that idea of being able to analyze media more critically and to understand how to use the 5 core principles and key questions in order to do that. I focused on these 2 particular core principles, the active inquiry and critical thinking, and then developing informed and reflective messages as well. And then these 2 definitions are what we would hone in on in understanding what media literacy is and knowing why it's so important to be able to be both critical thinkers and contributors of media. So we start with the 5 questions, of course, and go over those together. And then I thought that we would look at this Amazon ad together. This ad caught my attention a number of times because it is a gentleman who is using sign language, and I thought that that was very interesting, and I questioned the choice that Amazon uses here. And so I thought that it would be good to go through this together as a class and delve into these questions together as a beginning point. Then we would talk about what we use the process for in different ways and basically for everything, but I wanted students to be able to see that. Then the next step is for them to get into partners and look at this ad or another ad. I think that this could be very interchangeable with anything that is popular or contemporary, and then have them work in these pairs to break down the message together. Of course, this will depend on how we can do this with the restrictions that we have in place, but I think it's doable. The next thing would be a small group activity, and this particularly will depend on what small groups look like in this COVID-19 era, but I do think that students could also potentially do this as an online activity, so I'm hopeful for that. It might take a little bit of tweaking, but I still think it would be something they could do. And really what they're going to do is read an article together. I have 3 articles, and then I would assign each group an article, and they'll read the article together. They'll analyze it using the 5 key questions, maybe take a few notes, and then we'd come back together as a large group and summarize the article and then explain what the group discussed. I also thought that this would work well as a jigsaw where, again, when we have more fluidity in our classrooms or fluidity of movement in our classrooms, that the groups, you maybe have 6 groups and 2 groups each do the same article, and then those groups break into small groups with the other articles and discuss it that way. These are the 3 articles I chose at this time. Again, this is something that I think would need to be updated or switched out as articles became more relevant or information changes. These 3 caught my attention because the headlines could potentially be misleading. They could be very valid, but it would take looking more closely at them in order to study and analyze whether or not they are providing useful information. After the groups have all shared or done the jigsaw, I would like students to do a reflection on how this might change the way that they take in information and why they think it now is important to consider the 5 key questions for the media that they encounter. I included this as an opportunity, particularly for students that you would like to take a little farther or maybe like upper level students to change it up a little bit. But these are those media artifact interrogation questions that go into violence and ethnicity and some of those other questions a little bit more closely. And I think it would be a good activity maybe for honors level classes, or even if your regular classes, you just want to spend a little bit more time on the activity. Then the next thing is for students to actually practice on their own, or maybe in pairs, depending on the class constituency, but they get to choose something and then apply the key questions on their own. So going back to that scaffolded kind of, we did it as a large group, then they did it in pairs, and now they're more on their own or with one other person. And then lastly, it isn't just about consuming media, it's about producing it, since we know that students produce a lot of social media. And some of our students enjoy having that platform to discuss. So giving them the opportunity to actually go through the 5 core principles personally about what they are producing. And so we'd go over these questions together. And then the extended activity would be for them to choose one of these 3 things or create their own kind of social media platform, whatever they are most comfortable with, and doing something where they have to apply the 5 core principles to something that they produce. And that is my project.